Hello and welcome back to Let's Drone Out. Tonight you are joined by everyone's favourite Curry Kitten.
Hello.
Return to home jacket Stephen.
Hello.
Our Lord and Master and Christmas jumper fanatic Frank.
Good evening.
Hello.
My darling wife.
Bonjour.
My mum bought you a present, by the way.
Me?
Yep. And I've got a Christmas card
nice.
for you. John RC Video Reviews.
Hey guys, hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
There.
Thank you.
And I'm Bright Until I Fly, and yeah, we're going to start the show. Stephen, do you want to tell us what's going on?
Oh, I didn't invite John on, so I'm not sure that I'm the best one to do the lead.
Jack, do you never read the notes? Yes.
No, I don't know where the notes are.
Oh, for God's sakes. Look,
I've been in an MRI scan, and I've been shitting.
Oh, shut up, whinging about yourself. We don't need it. Jack's ill, and he's still shitting himself, everybody. Move on. Right. John runs the channel RC Video Reviews. Jack's just gone to the toilet again. Who basically has a channel where he does lots of flying and some reviewing of stuff and a lot of things with radios and stuff. And it was pointed out to me by somebody that says, hey, he's flying a quad, and he was mentioning the tutorials I did about flying Accra, and I thought, this is a guy with impeccable taste. We must have him on the show and talk to him. That is pretty much it. And John was kind enough to have me on one of his live streams as well. He does a live stream every Friday. If you start very late in the UK, you can catch it. It's on a more reasonable time in the US. So welcome to John.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks. Glad to be here. And yeah, I would agree. Those videos were spectacularly good because you go out and find, if you're new to the quad pilotage, there's so many guides out there, but a lot of times these guys will get up and they'll fling the quads around really fast and they go right into 3D and you're like, wait a minute, I don't even know how to take off yet. And that's what I loved about your videos is you just kind of marked them off into quadrants and said, okay, let's start with the basics. And then you moved on, and it was brilliant. So yeah, I attribute your videos to helping me get off the ground pretty quickly without any real fanfare, honestly.
Yeah, I am quite slow as well. That's me working at full pace. But tell us a little more about what your channel is and what you're doing at the moment. We were talking before, and I know you've done an awful lot on EdgeTX, which is going to make Stephen happy, and recently doing quite a lot on helicopters, which are quite frightening, and you do quite a lot on planes as well, and do some line of sight and FPV and all sorts. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I got started flying a long time ago, back in the 90s, and I got out of it for some time and did some on-road stuff, but when I got back into it, it took me very little time to go straight into FPV. And when I say FPV, I don't mean these guys. I mean fixed wing long range, because I lived out in the deserts of Arizona. And this was before the government and the news had us, all being criminals for flying beyond line of sight. And we'd go out in the desert and we'd fly, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, and 10, 12 miles away. We built antenna trackers and we would just go out and fly. We'd fly these huge loops, and we didn't think anything of it because, I mean, where I lived, you couldn't hurt a coyote if you tried to. So that was my first real big area of interest when I got into RC again after being out of it for a couple of years. And I spent a lot of time with Eagle Tree Vector, with Dragon Link UHF and 1.3 gigahertz video. I went out and got a ham license so I could operate the radios legally. And had a great time with that, and I still miss it. Some of the footage that I used to get, the HD footage, it's still, those are memories that you have, and I've got pictures from lakes and deserts and rivers and dams and things that you would never see without being in the air. And I just, that's my real true love, is the long range FPV. But we really can't do that anymore, and if we do, we can't talk about it. So, and we're certainly not supposed to post videos about it. I'm not saying I don't have any. I'm just saying you're not supposed to post it. So, because of that, when I moved back to Florida, I moved back home, I wound up flying at a field, an AMA field, which was very foreign to me because I was kind of like a rebel. We just went out to the desert and did our stuff there. But the AMA field, I kind of pushed more into fixed wing and, the local park stuff and sport flying. And you can do so much of that to a point. And then, the quads, I started paying attention to the quads, and I had people ask me on the channel to get into doing quads. And because I love mechanical stuff and I'm a consummate tinkerer, I got into quads. And my last real nice build was this little Badger that I have in front of me. This is a brilliant little frame. It's an Armaton Badger I got from Race Day Quads, and it's got the titanium camera mount, the DJI camera system, a little run cam up there, just for tinkering with. But I absolutely love flying these too. The problem is, when you're running a YouTube channel, you can do the builds and talk about the technology, but when it comes to the flight videos, where I go, we just go around in a circle, and that's all you can really do. So anyway, that's that on the quads. And then I have a group of people in my channel who are absolutely dedicated heli fanatics, and they had been asking me for months and months to get into helicopters. They said, do helicopter, fly helicopter. So I finally started tinkering with helicopters, and I just have a blast with these two because they are very mechanical in nature, and lots of whirly bits, and they still use the computer. I'm a tech guy, so you still got a flight, or it's called a fly barless, but it's basically a flight computer, handles the mixing and throws. Fly by wire is what it is. So I put a couple of these together, and now I'm kind of bit with these, but I just have fun with everything. The hobby. I'm a tech guy. I've got a background in radio. I've got a background in network engineering. And as soon as I could get a wrench on a motor when I was a teenager, I did. So to me, the whole hobby just kind of comes together, and I love it all. And I'm an equal opportunity adventurous when it comes to flying. I'll try just about anything when it comes to flying. And I can tell you the helicopters, boy, they really absolutely put you to the test. It's been a challenge learning them, and I'm still kind of a rookie, and I don't have what I would call advanced skills, but I can get around the field, do a few tricks, and I'm still practicing. So that's it. And then the EdgeTX stuff, that's how my channel really kind of took off. I started. I used to watch Lee at Painless 360, and I'd watch him when I first got into OpenTX with my Tyrannus, and then I got to that point, a tipping point where I played around with things so much that I started answering more questions than I asked, and that's when I started doing the videos. And I've been heavily involved in EdgeTX. In fact, I've completely made the conversion now to EdgeTX. I no longer have an OpenTX radio. Everything I've got is EdgeTX, and I've got a lot of radios too. I tinker. So yeah, I'm always fooling around. And Edge, I actually compile my own kernel on a nightly basis. I watch their updates very closely, and I like to see what they're up to. And those guys, they're just brilliant. They're very welcoming, very encouraging of ideas and participation. And I'm just really thrilled with what I see going on over there at Edge. Yeah, great group.
You've got the new gimbals there, is that? The metal gimbals on the one on the right?
This one. Yeah, the AG01 Radio Master gimbals. Radio Master sent those to me for review. They kind of hooked me up with a lot of equipment. And they sent those over for me to do a little review and install them and talk about how they go. And they're good. They're nice.
Big difference. I mean, in terms of the feel between those and the regular, because you've got Hall sensors already, so it's going to be a nice smooth action. But obviously, the weight of the metal is going to feel different.
Yeah, I've had this conversation in Discord quite a bit, and the thing about gimbals, I kind of have this argument with gimbals that says, if we stipulate that every modern gimbal in a decent radio these days has 4 bearings, right? You've got the north-south axis, the east-west axis. So if we stipulate they're all riding on bearings, that kind of accounts for the feel. Now, I suppose if you're really good, you might be able to say, well, I can tell the difference in bearings. I can't tell the difference in bearings. So for me, it's not really about the bearing movement, but what it comes down to is the weight. And I found ways to accommodate for weight if I don't like it, by using different springs. So I go out and get Futaba springs. Futaba makes some heavy duty springs. And I did change these springs out from the stock ones to Futaba. And I like the feel with it there. So the weight is very heavy with those Futaba springs, and the bearings obviously are very smooth. So, to me, it's a suit to taste thing. And I think most of when it comes down to feel, my view is that most of it comes down to the spring tension and how much weight you put on those springs. And then, of course, there's other things too, like the stick length and the centering. They did make some mechanical adjustments to the way these gimbals center. So the old style, it had more of a fine point on center. This one is a little flatter and a little wider. So it does tend to center better. And I know on the Hall sensor, they also made some adjustments so that you can avoid
drift. That was one of the big complaints, is temperature drift.
So when you say it's flatter and wider, you mean it doesn't like push itself right into the center? It just loses a little bit of the spring when it gets to the center, or what?
No, what I'm saying is when it hits center, it locks on center. So
it locks. There's like an indent almost.
Yeah. If you've ever taken a Horus radio apart and look at the way they do it, they have a very clever mechanism for centering. It's a very flat plate and a very wide plate. So when it centers, it locks. And I know that was also one of the complaints. And I think what I believe what Radio Master did is kind of split the difference. They didn't go with that big wide plate that the Horus uses, but they use their own new design, and a little bit narrower, but it's not a fine point. It's not like a point resting on a plate and that you rely on that for center. It's just a little bit wider.
I've wondered if that shows up in some freestyle pilots flying, because a lot of the moves you see, they really just, it's like a turn and then just lock on to an attitude. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if the ability to kind of lock on to center much more aggressively would actually show up in your footage.
I can tell you that it absolutely made a difference in helicopter flying. You have to use rudder. That's one thing you'll learn if you fly a helicopter. There's no getting away from rudder. You can cheat on, and well, as you guys know, in quads, it's the same deal. You got to use rudder in quads as well. But when I got these gimbals, this is my helicopter radio. So I put them in this radio, and I can tell you right away that it made a huge difference in keeping the pitch more aligned when I use the rudder. So, or maybe I reverse that. The rudder is more aligned when I use the pitch. So I find myself not drifting on rudder as much because I'm a thumber. And I know a lot of guys that fly, helicopters, they are pinchers. I'll probably work on adapting that at some point, but right now I'm a thumber. So you have that arc, and when you are moving that pitch, it's real easy to touch that rudder. So that harder center definitely helps avoid that rudder movement when you're thumbing like I am.
Yeah. You just
no doubt
sit in a rut almost without jumping from side to side, breaking the line.
Yeah. Same thing with the elevator and aileron as well. So I'm mode 2, but over here, elevator and aileron, it's the same concept. You find yourself if you're trying to just utilize the elevator and you don't want to roll, that centering does help out there. It's a little more locked in.
Yeah. I think with freestyle quad pilots, you often see this kind of like turn and bank and then lock, and it's almost like the footage just kind of snaps into an attitude, and before from moving from one trick to another, you get this kind of locked in feeling. And I was wondering if that was contributing.
Yeah. I think so. And then the heavier springs too. If you haven't tried that, it takes a little acclimation to get used to the heavier springs. But now when I go back to radios that don't have like these gimbals are FlySky gimbals. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but FlySky,
the MV14 ones.
Yeah. Well, PL18. Yeah. Same, but they're the same.
Right,
they're the same. So FlySky sent me some radios to review, and they sent me a spare set of gimbals, and I put these in the TX16S. And with EdgeTX, they just completed a firmware auto detect. So now if you use the FlySky gimbals, it will automatically pick that up and they'll work. So these are digital, these are analog, but now you can switch back and forth. And same thing, that these are a little bit looser. They feel very foreign to me after flying this one. I picked this up and it feels like somebody else's radio, but it's mine. But I need to find a way to tighten those springs up a little bit.
People were
too floppy.
We're saying those were very advanced gimbals with some 3D Hall sensor or something. People were picking apart the minutiae, and one of them's SPI and the other one's a serial connection or something, right?
Yeah, there's a ribbon cable that goes in between them, and then there's a single digital connection that goes onto the header board on the main board. So the big conversation I've had, and I've spent a lot of time talking with developers. I spent time talking with Radio Master. The great big question out there is resolution. So these are, there's this whole thing about resolution. You have to be very careful about the way you position it, because these are 4096 gimbals. So are these, by the way. But these are 4096 gimbals. But the problem is you don't get that resolution on the output because the air protocol doesn't support 4096. It only supports 2048. Right. So you're going to have stepping. And when I dug into it and tried to really understand what the difference was, what I got from the developers, having a very I don't make your guys' eyes bleed here, but having a very detailed conversation with one of the key developers, Risto. I don't know if you guys follow EdgeTX, but he spent about an hour talking me through it. The bottom line is that there's a lot of math that goes on between the analog finger, this is analog, and this is digital. So there's a conversion that goes on between analog and digital. And as the movements of the stick work their way through the inputs, mixes, and outputs on the radio, there's math that has a certain degree of precision. So if you have a 4096 gimbal, your math can be more precise as you move through the inputs, mixes, and outputs, versus a 2048 gimbal, the math is less precise. There's a very complex mathematical process they go through when they move stuff through the radio, but that's the bottom line explanation that I got from the Edge developers. Is they said we can be more precise with the math as we move through on a higher resolution gimbal. However, because the protocol only supports 2048, at the end, what you send over the air is only at 2048 resolution.
They're talking about changing that, though, right?
Yes.
There's been some rumblings about moving to 12-bit, which would take it to 4096.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think there is one protocol out there that does it. I believe it's a Futaba protocol that does it today. So if you have Futaba, you might.
You've still got analog noise and stuff, though, right? Because ultimately, you're just moving a magnet next to this sensor, and it's kind of beholden to whatever environmental effects or other electrical noise inside the radio might be occurring.
Right. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, the mechanics are no different. It's just a higher resolution and it's a digital format instead of analog. That's the only difference.
And what's the protocol that's kind of restricting everything at the moment? Is this the protocol between the gimbal and the radio, or between the radio and the module, or what's going on there?
It's the air protocol. So all the FreeSky D16, D8, Futaba, all the stuff in the NPM, they all work at 11-bit. So 2048.
Some guys who've been doing custom ExpressLRS handsets have built stuff that does 12-bit end-to-end, but right now OpenTX doesn't kind of accommodate that, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing with ExpressLRS, because that's LoRa, which those guys are brilliant too. I absolutely love what they're doing. I mean, it's fascinating watch. We're in a great state right now watching what's happening with software and hardware. But the ExpressLRS stuff, because it's LoRa, there's a real requirement to manage the relationship between bandwidth and power and distance, right? So what they're doing is they've reduced the bandwidth significantly. That's what LoRa does, is it reduces the bandwidth significantly, and it trades that bandwidth for range, even at very low power levels. If you look at the ExpressLRS leaderboard, there's guys out there flying 40 kilometers at 100 milliwatts on 915, which is just amazing. I remember with Dragon Link at 433, we were pushing those at 1 watt, and the Dragon Link would self-adjust just like Crossfire does. But it's amazing to watch that kind of work. But so now if you go back to the protocol and say, well, we're going to stuff more information into a packet, now you might need more bandwidth. So you know, they're using that bandwidth. That's a very key feature in how they extract the range in ExpressLRS. You know, that's a key.
Yeah, and we had this discussion. Some guys here saying, you know, when can we use it for our wings? When can we get more than 4 full range channels?
Yeah,
and to do that, you're going to have to sacrifice, like you're saying, sacrifice some of the strengths that you've got by keeping that low bandwidth, and give up some of that range in order to get more full range channels effectively.
Well, you know, one of the topics that I've heard of, and I've seen it, I think, I'm not sure if it was Ghost or I don't think it's Tracer, but there's this idea of automatically switching between protocols. So using something like a normal frequency hopping spectrum protocol for local stuff, and then automatically switching to LoRa if you're at range. And that might make sense, because in the local protocol, you could use the extra channels for your gear and flaps and things like that. But then when you take off and put your gear up and your flaps up, you really only need the 4, maybe pan and tilt. But yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be, I look forward to seeing how they address that. But you guys know there is a Maytech module out there right now that's ExpressLRS with PWM output, right? That's out there. So yeah, that's really exciting to see that.
Not on Maytech's website when I last looked, but it was on AliExpress, which was strange.
Yeah, Maytech has it.
Yeah, we were talking about it the other day, because it still has the problem with the reduced resolution above, like, so your pan and tilt will be a little bit.
And you better make sure not to map channel 5 to actual channel 5, because that's just a binary channel for your arming, so you're not going to get anything useful out of that.
That's right. Yeah, those are the things they have to work through. And you know, if they can find a way to use an automatic protocol switcher that says we'll use LoRa for range and one of the common frequency hoppers for local, that's it. I think game over for the industry, because they're amazing.
Did you see the guys who were looking at this FR Sky tandem system and kind of jealously thinking, oh, maybe we'll have a go at hacking at that? And one guy was trying to figure out how to get 2.4 and 900 running at the same time on both end and toggle between them, and rely on one for telemetry and the other for the outbound data and so forth, and combine the two.
Yeah, I mean, you could actually do something like that with one of these radios if you wanted to get creative, because you've got an internal and external module. So if you had an internal module, for example, that had ExpressLRS, you could have an internal running Express and an external running Express. And I've actually seen some people tinkering with that, putting an ExpressLRS module internal to the radio. So if that happens, then yeah, you could actually run both simultaneously, 2 different receivers, 2 different transmitters, same radio. That's a possibility.
FR Sky are going to have a lot of trouble selling their really expensive Futaba competitor radio at that point.
Yeah. I was just going to say, there's definitely been autopilots in the past that can take multiple receivers as well. I think, I can't remember who made it now. It is like RVOSD or something back in the day, because I remember someone having 2 free skies and different polarities in their antennas to get max range, and having 2 RSSIs, and it would just flip to the right one. But you could do the same thing with two separate receivers just running from a single radio, 2 outputs at the same time.
Now, I suppose there's nothing technically to stop a flight controller from having 2 RX inputs, right? It just have to have some logic in there to manage which one it was listening to. Some logic,
say we'll take it from this one because this has a better signal, not like get it from both. That would be bad.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I did notice.
Although I still like the idea of like, let's have 2 receivers. You have aileron and throttle, and you have rudder and elevator, and let's see if we can fly a plane together. I think that would be fun.
That's always fun. Yeah.
You know, a friend of mine, when I was in Arizona, there's this. I forgot the name of it. It's a switcher. It's a radio switcher, and the idea is it's in air. It's meant to be a wireless trainer, and you hook 2 receivers up to it. And we had 2 fields within a mile of each other, and we thought about connecting a Dragon Link to both, and then getting on FPV and having him sit at one field and launch the plane and fly it FPV over to the other field. And I was going to go sit in my chair with my radio, no airplane, and just sit down, put my goggles on, and start talking to myself while I flew the plane. Because we know the guys at the field have been like, what the hell is this guy doing? There's no airplane. And then all of a sudden, when the airplane came into range and I saw it, I would flip off he would flip off when he saw the field, he'd flip off the master and switch it over to me, so I'd have control, and I'd bring the plane in and land it. We actually mapped it out, and we were going to do it. I just moved before we could get it done, but we were going to do that. That would have been fun. But it's just this little device that takes 2 receivers and one output. So and it's got a channel to let you switch from one to the other. I have it in my stash somewhere. I'll have to get that thing out and fool with it. But yeah, neat little gadget.
Interesting.
It was actually my friend's idea was to do something more stupid in terms of flying a plane together, and he comes up with all the stupid ideas. So we did things like, let's do first person view, where like I would follow his plane and then he'd switch to my channels, and then he'd fly his plane through my view, so it's like line of sight through FPV. And we did like FPV from a moving car as well and stuff. But he came up with the idea, which we never got to because it sounds absolutely too crazy, about having 2 head trackers. And our head trackers, instead of working on a pan tilt, one would be throttle and aileron, the other would be rudder and elevator. And we thought, yeah, we could stand in the field together and we could go like this, and we can somehow try and fly a plane together. We never got there. To be fair, I don't think it would have been a good flight or something that went very far, because I think we would have crashed horrifically. But that would be fun to try.
That would. I had a guy come into my channel for a little while. He was kind of like in and out, and he stayed for a couple of weeks, and he was doing FPV using cell towers somehow. It was ArduPilot, and I guess he was using the cellular network to be able to control the craft, and he could go pretty long range with that too. I never invested too much time into it, mainly because, again, we're at this stage right now in the States, at least, where they're kind of cracking down on that. So it's just not a good area to spend time.
Well, they're simultaneously cracking down on it and making it a commercial prospect with people like Amazon and others opening up drone deliveries, and you can bet that they're going to be using things like 5G to assist them if it's available. I also heard an interview with Airspeeder, and Airspeeder are making claims that they're partnering with Telstra in Australia, which is one of the 5G providers over there.
Yeah, they certainly the government found a way to really monetize the RF spectrum for cellular, and those companies pay big dollars to get access to those bandwidth carve outs. So I'm absolutely not surprised to hear that there's a commercial interest in saying, hey, what about airspace? Can we monetize that somehow? So yeah, no doubt in my mind, I don't know what the full strategy is, but you can see based on who they're asking for comments and who's invited to the table to talk about how they're going to compartmentalize the sport flying that we do from the commercial aspects, and it's all the big players. So no surprise that that's going on. None at all.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting to figure out how people intend to do flying when they've got, at least 200 milliseconds latency. When you're in some remote location and you're going from one cell tower to another cell tower down onto the main metro network, there's just no way you're going to do that with aggressive latency numbers. So it'd be interesting to hear what happens.
Well, they're going to do, it's probably airline miles. That's what I used to refer to it when I would go fly long range. The idea was we'd sit somewhere and we'd fly off somewhere and then fly around a little bit and then fly back. And I always called the travel between the 2 points, I called those airline miles, because all you're doing is just going straight. You're not doing maybe a little exploring, but we'll see how it unfolds. But the radio technology too, with what they're doing with LoRa, I've seen absolutely insane ranges with very low power levels too. These guys aren't even really pushing the power. So I guess if you were to do like a commercial implementation of LoRa that was authorized by the powers that be with some high power output, who knows? I mean, who knows how far they could go with, say,
so long as you've got kind of an onboard brain that can do active collision avoidance and detection, I suppose it's not too big of a hassle. As long as you're not relying on an operator behind that latency to do your collision avoidance.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. One of my regulars on my channel, his name is Drone Pilot. He just shared a video flying one of his new. He just got the commercial license down in Australia, and he just posted a video on my Discord showing how he had his DJI track him through a forest, and he basically just walked around through the woods, and he tried to get it to get caught up on the branches and the little hangy twigs from the trees, and he said it just didn't. And it was a good 5 minutes, so I was kind of impressed. Now that was slow though,
I bet I could hit it with a freestyle quad though. Put money.
Yeah,
like a 6S 5-inch freestyle, and I'll knock that Mavic out of the sky.
Yeah, that was walking pace. But who knows? Maybe I think that's obviously test bed material, right? So they take what they've got and they say, well, we know how we can dodge things. Now we got to make it quick. So we'll see. It's fascinating to watch, though. That's for sure. The technology that we're seeing out in this hobby right now is absolutely fascinating.
I'm just wondering what happens when you've got like maybe a, say, 20-pound payload flying over residential properties, going to drop a delivery off at someone's house, and people are flying at their local field, and they've got a couple of pounds worth of maybe 90-mile-an-hour vehicle up in the air. How you enable those two to happen at the same time. And they're talking about things like having beacons and stuff, but the actual airline pilots seem really against anyone else having beacons, because they're aware that as soon as this goes into consumer kit, there's going to be 1 million beacons lit up all over every major city, and it's going to be impossible to distinguish anything.
Yeah, I agree. In the US... Oh, sorry.
I'll just say, I'm extremely dubious that drone delivery will ever happen.
Me too.
Because
they're testing it right now.
One crash over a residential area to say this can't go on. Look at what's happened.
So they've got as far as trialing it in the States, right? One of the pharmacies is doing it. Was it Walgreens or someone? I can't remember.
It's weird because if you've been to the US, there's a Walgreens literally on every corner. I don't know why you'd need drone delivery.
Prevalent Starbucks.
I mean, it's also being done in the UK around some of the smaller islands, particularly during COVID. They've had some pretty big wings flying stuff out to islands. It's not.
This is a lighthouse with 5 people on the island, sure. But it's a different world, really, isn't it?
Let's go through central London and just drop something here, not there because we'll hit someone, just there somehow. I just
well, that's the other thing is
suspicious.
it's also being used as Blue Owl, as kind of covered before. It's being used out in Africa already. Similar sort of thing where it's not to the actual address, but there's points where it's it's going from point to point, and it's where there isn't the traditional kind of infrastructure for delivery. But I think that's probably more where it's going to be.
So you think instead of having like the traditional British
begin with.
red letterbox, post box at the end of the street, we might see some kind of drone landing area in future, a little street helipad where you can go and pick your deliveries
I
up
think
from.
it's probably more likely to be on the top of your local Amazon warehouse. There'll be a little drone thing that will be dropping it there from the warehouse, like 100 miles away.
Yeah, that
and
seems
it will just
pragmatic.
shave a day of logistics, and it will be all worth it for them.
Yeah, if they could hard code GPS coordinates for go here, go there, that makes sense to me, because that seems doable. Where you're not going to have interference from the populace. And I was about to say a little earlier, you guys are aware of the gun culture we have in the U.S. When I went out to the desert and flew long range, I'm not kidding. I have video of guys shooting at my plane. I'm not kidding. I have video of it. We'd fly over at 400 or 500 feet, and we'd use our pan and tilt and look down, and you'd see them come out. They'd come out of their garage with their guns. They'd aim up, and you'd see them shooting at us, trying to take them down. So that's another problem they'll have here too, is because we have that kind of crazy in the U.S. Where people will actually say, "Oh, yeah, how about that? I'm gonna see what that drone's carrying. I'm gonna get myself an Amazon drone and whatever it's carrying."
Pretty sure if you shoot like a ballistic up into the air from your property, that's pretty much guaranteed to be illegal. And well, over here in most places, because the kill range on that is just ridiculous. You could be killing someone a mile away without knowing it, right?
Oh yeah, no, we have same here. I'm not saying it's legal. I'm saying it will happen. That's what I'm saying.
And they don't care that you're filming them.
I always thought if they ever get deliveries done, the sport would be, let's go and see if we can take them down with our normal quads for fun. I never considered people just randomly shooting at them as well.
Yeah,
which is a whole new different thing.
All of a sudden, Jack's parts bin gets a lot bigger.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I need a motor. Let's just, off we go. There's one. Get it.
Yeah.
Hook one out the sky.
I'm also wondering, like, how much are the delivery drones worth? Like, you're flying one of those over East London. How long before a bunch of kids just go out and get the nets out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
start stabbing it. Just out of instinct.
They steal pizza delivery drivers like cheap ass scooters. What are they going to do to get hold of some like £20,000, £20,000 worth of quadcopter?
People are just going to get order those frequency jammers and make a massive cannon and just fail safe it out of the air.
Yeah. The people disassembling microwaves in the street and trying to.
Yeah.
Speaking of fail safes, John, what do you use in your helis? Just thinking about line of sight stuff. Like I've been to a lot of line of sight fields, haven't been to a lot of line of sight fields with helis being flown out. The only time I've really seen a load of helis being flown has been at Western Park, which is a big event near us, and it's there. I think pretty much everyone seemed to be using like Jetty radios. I think that seems to be the one I noticed. I don't know what's kind of the standard.
Jetty is a big one, and V-Bar is another big one for the heli guys. But I bucked that trend because I've been on OpenTX and now EdgeTX for my entire flight career, and I've sent stuff downrange, and I've gotten it all back. So these are the radios I use. But regarding the fail-safe on these fly barless units on the back, they have a rescue mode. So what the rescue mode does is it will, whatever the helicopter is doing, it will level it and then climb for a period of time. And that's all configurable. So I actually put my rescue on a momentary switch. So if I'm flying and I hit that, the helicopter will level and climb. There are two problems with the rescue mode or the fail-safe mode on this one, and that's that if you're inverted, it will level inverted and climb inverted, which reverses the pitch stick. So you have to be prepared for that. That when you let go, you don't want to instantly go up and think you're going to climb, because you could smash it down into the ground, which is terrible. And there are plenty of videos of people doing that. And then the other problem that I've noticed in the rescue mode is that if you're doing maneuver you're flying the helicopter and it gets wonky and you decide to hit rescue, it will level up, but the problem is it maintains whatever momentum it had. So if you're cooking along with a head of steam and you hit the rescue mode, it will square itself up, but it keeps going. And that can be problematic if you're already having visibility or orientation issues. Now, there is another one that I haven't tried yet, and I'm kind of thinking about it. I actually mentioned it in the Discord, in my Discord, and the helicopter guys just skewered me, and they said real men don't fly with GPSs on their helis, and they
That
gave
was
me
going to
a
be my
rational
next question.
Yeah, there is a GPS unit that actually does. It'll hover it, it'll bring it home, and I am thinking about trying it out. Yeah, I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm thinking about trying it.
You've got a lot of money in the air, and you can't just slam those things into the ground like you can a quad, right? It's gonna
absolutely not.
Lot
These are glass jaw Joes. If this goes in the dirt, you're gonna write a check. I had a little one. I have it over there. I can show it in a minute. But I had a little one. I was flying around the front yard, and I landed it on my sidewalk, and the blades just touched the grass, and it tipped over, and that cost me $50 for a feathering shaft. I broken this, I broken that. I broke the one-way bearing. I couldn't believe it. $50, and it wasn't even a flight error. It was the stupid thing touched the grass. Unbelievable.
See, I was going to ask the question, because if you're flying a collective pitch or 3D on a heli, obviously you don't want to just knock the throttle down. I was going to say, how do you get used to that? Because if we have a problem in a quad, we'd instantly knock the throttle down and just stop. But you don't do that in a heli, because there's no instance you just want to have it land on the ground out of control. I suppose you've got to get good in a sim before you even think about taking a real heli out, and at that point you're just sort of like hovering and coming down and building up really slowly, are you?
That's a great question, and there's actually a way to solve a little bit of that in the radio, because I did exactly what you said. The first time I tried forward flight, it got uncomfortable for me, and I pulled the stick down, which is the instantaneous reaction if you're a fixed wing, slow the aircraft down and then make the turn, whatever. And when I did that, it cannonballed it directly into the ground. I mean, it just turned it into a freaking meteor. So the way you solve that is with a pitch curve that looks like this. So in this pitch curve, what happens is, this is what heli guys call normal mode. So in normal mode, you have a pitch curve that takes away the full negative pitch. It only goes about -3 or 4 degrees. So in normal mode, while you're flying, you can put a curve in that basically takes the 3D out of it by only having it go -3. And so if when you first start flying, it's a good idea to fly around with a pitch curve like that. When you decide to get adventurous, then your pitch curve looks like that. It's more linear in nature. So, it's a straight pitch curve. But when you're learning, or if you're, just tooling around a little bit, you're not going to do any stunts. It's not a terrible idea to use this, because that way, if you do go full negative, you can see that your pitch doesn't go all the way down to here. And that's the way we solve that.
No. I don't know if any of you guys have tried using a 3D quad, but I had exactly that problem. As soon as I'd get into a problem, drop the throttle.
Yeah.
So it went in so fast. Trying to get to neutral, it takes a lot of thought. It's obviously easier just to, I should just...
You've got to switch flight modes. That's got to be your reaction then. You've got to teach yourself to switch flight modes rather than...
Yeah, and I think, there is that learning curve. So when you first start out, maybe the first thing to do is fly around with a mode like that for a little while until you kind of get it. It was amazing to me how hard it was to get forward flight, because, again, the rudder, the orientation, you have to do this coordinated turn. And if you don't, when I first, at least for me, when I first started flying helicopters, they would get in these kind of weird, uncoordinated modes. And when that happened, boy, they would just come out of the sky like a bowling ball. And the way I solved that, a friend of mine gave me a little plastic Blade 3 Nano. And that thing, if you're going to crash it, all you have to do is kill the power. You just hit the power throttle cut. And when you do that, that thing, it doesn't matter how it crashes, it survives. So you just walk over, pick it up, take off again. Okay. And that's what kind of got me over the forward flight thing.
So you've got to start with something that's light enough, it doesn't have enough energy to trash itself.
Exactly right. That's exactly the point. It doesn't have enough mass to be able to damage itself when it hits. So that was brilliant, because that got me over, the forward flight stuff that I was struggling with. It got me over the first flips, the first loops, the first everything. I tried out on that. Once I did it in real life, then the funny part is you go out with a real helicopter like this one, and it's a lot easier to do than those little, cheapy plastic ones.
So you've learned to counter all the wind movement and the noise that you got in the cheap quad, and it makes you a better pilot as well then.
Yeah, the little ones, they're definitely squirrely. They're hard to hold on to. So that definitely makes you a better pilot, because if you can chase one of those down and make it do what you want, these things, and this is kind of a small one. I did it because it fits on the desk, but this is a 380 class helicopter, and it's fairly lightweight. You can see, but they have 700s that are like this, and when you put those, and the biggest one I've flown so far is a 550. And when you put that thing in the air, it's just kind of like, whoa, it just parks itself and it hovers, and it's amazing. It's a lot easier to control than even this one. So the bigger ones are definitely easier to manage, in my opinion.
And that one you've got there, that's is it a Saab Goblin?
SAB
right?
Goblin Buddy. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do great graphics too. That's the other thing about these things. The graphics work is amazing. They're very step up, high level stuff on the graphics, and yeah, they just look good. It's they're fun to play with. It's a whole new thing. If you want to challenge yourself with something new in RC, try a helicopter out. I'll tell you what. I'm not going to say I was arrogant about it, but I'm like, how hard can it be? What a lesson.
I was fascinated to see some guys fork Betaflight a while ago, and they created a project called Heli Flight 3D, I think, or maybe Rotaflight as well. They changed names. Have you experimented with that any? Have you heard about that?
I have not. Part of the reason for that is because when it comes to, we talked about cost, right? Once you get it figured out, it's kind of like this formula. I just don't want to really mess with it. I know this computer,
Sure.
And being a review channel, I probably should start experimenting a little, but money is still money, so I get a little nervous. I'm kind of familiar with this one now. On my Discord, I've got some good help, and now I know enough about it. I can set them up on my own. So yeah, that's why I haven't really experimented, because these things aren't cheap. I normally go with what's called a basher. When I experiment, I have another helicopter, 380 size. It's a Protos 380, and that kit alone was only 139 US. So that's what I call my basher. And I experiment on that one. So if I do anything like that, I'll probably try it on the Protos. I would not experiment with this until I have it working. And this is a small one. This is a small SAB, but SAB, their quality is superb, but they charge for it. And I'll tell you another thing that I had a hard pill to swallow was the motors and the servos too. When I first looked up the motor for a helicopter, this little thing was a $100 motor, and I thought, what the hell are they thinking? So I do a lot of motor testing on my channel too, and I thought I can beat that. So I went out and found another motor that was equivalent, but the thing that stopped me was the temperature. This one has a much higher rated temperature than the fixed wing motors, much higher, like dramatically higher. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I see the problem. The last thing I want on a helicopter is my magnets to come loose while I'm flying, because I
Don't you have a pretty aggressive amount of airflow there, though?
Well, I mean, there's not much there on the front. And I guess if you're hovering or, doing TikToks or whatever, you're not really necessarily moving through the air. It kind of depends on your flight style, I guess. But at any rate, I went out and checked some of the helicopter websites and just looked at setups. And one thing I can tell you is that this is an X-Nova motor, and setup after setup after setup, they said X-Nova, X-Nova, X-Nova. So, when in Rome, that's the way I looked at it.
What size of motor is that?
This one's only like a 2800. I'm getting my glasses on so I can read it. It's like a 2820 890 kV. And I'll tell you that, speaking of kV, yep, that's it. 2820 890 10 pole. And it runs 6S. And speaking of kV, that's another thing that kind of shocked me. One of my helicopters is an Align T-Rex, and that came with a 1600 kV, but it runs on 6S. Let that soak in for a minute if you're a fixed wing guy. Like, if you would have said to me 3 months ago, go ahead and connect a 6S battery to a 1600 kV motor, I would have said, if you're off your rocker. Like, are you crazy? But that's the way they do it. Now, there's gearing, of course. There's opinion in a gear, so it changes things. But in the fixed wing world, you never say things like 6S and 1600 kV. You say 6S and 500 kV. So that was another thing that I kind of had to learn, was that's perfectly natural in the helicopter world. So it's a huge learning curve. I mean, everything about it is
Head
huge.
speeds on those things are scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if you could get one of those motors and try it on a fixed wing and see.
Well,
just
I
be
just
like,
yeah, one of my recent live streams, I showed a big motor for a 5 Series helicopter, and I made that exact point. I said, hey, if you're out there, struggling to find the right size motor with the right power, check out a helicopter motor, because the bolt pattern's the same, the wiring's the same. You might have to manipulate the shaft because they use the base here, and the shaft normally goes down through the base. For fixed wing guys, normally the shaft comes out this way normally. Some airplanes have the shaft out of the base, like the precision aerobatic stuff. But anyway, if you can relocate the shaft, then that might be an option. They make ludicrous power. I just bought a motor yesterday for a Tron 7 that I have coming, and that is a 5,820 watt motor at 115 amps with a 6L battery. Absolutely ludicrous.
What kind of ESC are you running then? It must be some insanely chunky ESC.
Well, it kind of depends. So in the 700, there's a dividing line in that world where if you're one of these professional, they call them smack pilots, that if you ever watch the heli videos, these guys get up and they're like, it's crazy. You can barely even see what the helicopter's doing. In that configuration, they would probably use a 200 amp ESC. But it depends on your amperage and how hard you're flying it, of course. I'm not that good. I'm more of a casual sport flyer, or big air, what they would call big air in the heli community. And in that model, on that 700, it'll be 130 amp ESC. The motor itself peaks out at 150 for continuous, but 115 for continuous. But the reason you do the 130 is because the 130 hobby wing is the first one that supports 12S. So that'll be a 12S helicopter.
Wow.
On my 6S helicopters, the big 500s, 120 amp ESC for those.
Big value.
Those big
We've
ESC,
got a question come in. Sorry. I was just going to say, we've got a question coming from Richard Warwick, as I've talked about it before, and it says, question, is John not being on camera a deliberate decision on his part? Is he shy, wants to keep anonymous, or something else? Are you on the run? Are you shy, or is this just
I am
your
not.
thing?
I'm a citizen.
What did you do with FPV before?
No, as far as I know, no wants, no warrants. That's as far as I know. And the IRS knows where I live, so yeah, there's it's none of that. The reality is that I still have kids at home, and the world is kind of strange. I get so many things on YouTube that I made a decision that while I'm going to do this, I just don't want to be the personality. I want the technology to be the personality. So I made a choice way back when just to focus on the tech and the equipment rather than me. And then I also coupled that with the idea that I do have kids at home, and the world is a strange place these days. So until my kids are out of the house, and I don't want them to have to worry that I'm identified somehow. So I just, not that I feel like I'm famous or anything, but you never know. I get weird emails. I get comments on my channel.
sorry about that.
Where do you fly? When are you going to go flying next? What field do you fly? I've had people ask for my address. No, it's probably innocuous. They probably just want to send me a T-shirt or something. But I just, I'd rather just remain anonymous for the time being. And then the other cool thing about it, though, is that as the channel grows, there may be a point where I might be able to use that for a viral video or something. Hey, I'm going to unmask, at this point. So who knows? I haven't figured it out yet. But yeah, I just prefer to stay off camera.
I have had people recognize where I've been flying, and had someone ominously just appear behind me as I've been flying around. I'm like, who's that behind me? Why is he still stood there? What's going on?
Yeah.
There's another question. Ryan, you need to mute yourself, Steve. What would be a good starter model to begin with helicopter side of the RC world? I'm intrigued by the financial side of it all.
Intrigued is a good word.
I can tell you right now, if you guys get into helicopters, you better bring your wallet, because they're not cheap. But if you give me a moment, I'll bring out a couple of good examples of where I would recommend starting. Just give me one moment.
Yeah, no worries.
So I know I've had my eyes on one of the OMP helis since NJ was raving about them.
You do seem like you're turning to the dark side a little bit here, Frank. Are you between NJ and John here? Have you sort of thinking, I haven't got a heli.
I don't know you anymore.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, you know
Max-
me. I've flown way more line of sight than I've flown an FPV in the past year or two, and now that I actually have a car and I have a place to store things, and I have fields where I can fly stuff, and I have explicit permission to fly stuff, I could quite happily go in for a heli. So
Set like
I've
some money.
yeah, exactly.
I am fascinated by the radio side of things because generally, as far as the radio goes, it's like you don't do anything, do you? You do some stuff in Betaflight, you can fly a quad. But having looked at some radios today, and it had the whole throttle cut, and then the mixing something 120 degrees
The
or
swash plate
whatever, and
stuff.
swash plate stuff. It's like, what's all
Yeah.
this about? It's like you actually have to do something, program on your radio for a change, which would
I'm still
maybe be interesting.
I'm still blown away by John's radio gimbals. They're like light up. They look like something belong in a trendy London bar. They really do.
Yeah, those are the LEDs. They're available pretty much everywhere. They go on the Radio Master. You have to wire them in yourself, of course. And then I got to a point where I use this on the simulator, and at night, if the lights are off, I don't want the blue lights blowing in my face, so I decided to put a little on-off switch on there. For that doesn't come in that way. You have to put that in. But
So is that just a shim between the shell of the radio and
Yep.
the gimbal? You've
That's
got a
it.
translucent plate, right?
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Just a shim. That's exactly what it is. So anyway, regarding starting, I got a couple of different things out to show you guys. The first one is this is a Blade Nano. This is the one that my friend gave me.
Oh,
Yeah. And this is, weirdly enough, it is a fully 3D capable helicopter. It flies inverted. It's got full collective pitch. It's got negative
No
pitch.
way.
is that still a brushless motor? Or is
No,
that brushless?
this one is
Okay.
brushed. This is a brushed motor. And they're fairly cheap. You can get this for about $80. And it'll bind right up with a Radio Master radio. It supports DSM, so it just binds right up. So that's a good place to start. This is the one where I probably crashed this about 15 times before I ever finally got forward flight worked out. Crash after crash after crash. So that's a decent one. Those are readily available. And then here's another one. This is a K110 or an XK K110, and very similar to the Blade Nano. It's fully 3D capable, got full collective pitch, negative pitch. And you can get these on, I believe, Banggood for about $80 or $90. And same deal, right? They'll take a punch. You can crash these. The main thing you want to do before you crash them is make sure you kill the power. If it's going in, just kill the power, and they'll survive a crash. So these two, I would recommend these two as starters. Now, I did a video on these where I said this Blade Nano is like the worst piece of kit you have to own because it flies pretty much terribly. It just doesn't fly well. But that's not the point. The point is that, and when I say it doesn't fly well, I mean when you try and do tricks, you try and do TikToks or inverted hovering, it's a challenge. It's kind of squirrely. It flies in forward flight just fine. So it's a lot to hold on to. That's the point. It doesn't fly well, but because it can take such a punch and it's got the full configuration that you use on a full-size helicopter, it's a great learning platform. It'll kind of get you over the initial hurdles without spending too much money. I mentioned earlier a basher. This is what I call my basher. This is a little Protos 380. They don't really sell this particular model anymore. It's hard to get this one, but they do have a updated version of V2. It's a little more expensive, but in the grand scheme of things regarding helicopter pricing, this one's kind of cheap. It's basically got the same electronics kit as that buddy that I had, so the electronics are still a little spendy, but the kit itself is pretty cheap, and the replacement parts are readily available and fairly inexpensive. So this is another good one. Like once you say, okay, I can fly this around and not crash it, this would be a good place to maybe get your feet wet. Although there is a school of thought in the heli community that they have a saying that says, buy the biggest helicopter you can afford to repair. So they do say that because if you guys have ever flown big fixed wing aircraft are easier to fly. They just deal with the wind better. They're easier to see. They're easier to deal with. And there is a point to be made for that. Although I don't necessarily agree, because I don't, some of these things, if you crash the main gear, This main gear right here on some bigger helicopters can run as much as $50. On this aircraft it'd be $3. So you got to take that into consideration.
That's quite the jump.
It is. And then I thought I would get out a bigger one just to give you guys a look to see from a scale perspective what's involved in skipping from a 380 to a 500 class.
Gonna have to zoom the camera out now.
Yeah, I was just waiting for the biggest boom. Yeah, here we go. Oh, we've had Mummy Bear and Baby Bear. This is
gonna need a wider angle lens.
Daddy's in the house, yeah.
I know.
So it's what the even just the kind of the head of it, where the blades attach, is about as big as the whole TX16 radio.
Yeah, it literally has Fat Boy written on it.
Yeah.
that's quite the size comparison.
Yeah.
Just imagine scary samurai swords spinning at a couple of thousand RPM, and you're just about there.
Well, and the funny part about it is this is the Tron 5.5, and Fatboy is the retailer in the US. So these are OEM. They're actually RJX blades, but he silk screens his company name on there. And the Tron 7, I have that arriving actually today. One of the guys on my channel got his Tron 7 and started working on it last night. He took the canopy off his Tron 5, and it fits inside the Tron 7 canopy with plenty of room to spare. So the Tron 7 canopy, I can't even show you guys because I don't think I can zoom out that far. But yeah, it's huge. That's a huge. So this is a Tron 5. This is actually considered by a lot of people the first non-micro. So a lot of folks will consider something like this little 380 over here a micro heli. The 500 is where they stopped calling it a micro, at least in some circles.
Wow. I guess that's kind of similar to like a 300 size quad being a mini quad still.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So these are, I'm just fascinated by the machinery involved to make this whole thing work. And it's fascinating that they can produce them with such consistency too.
We have to ask Stephen about this because he talked about making a wing without any moving parts because he distrusts servos. So what's your idea for helicopter with no moving parts?
It's called a quadcopter, Wayne. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a recent innovation where people have dispensed with servos and mechanical complexity in favor of speed and brute power.
That's no fun. You have to do it with a single rotor.
Have you not seen Tom Stanton's one? He's done a helicopter without servos where he's just.
We were posting videos the week of some crazy Swede who was doing counter rotating design with kind of moving fans to direct the thrust on a rotor there.
Yeah, we are sat with Mr. Bone Drone himself.
Oh,
you,
yeah. That's a chunky motor,
that works so
isn't it?
well.
So what are we up to there? We're up from a 2820 to what, like 35 or something there?
This is a 4020 1200 kV. This is the joke that I was making earlier. This is a 1200 kV motor, and it uses a 6S battery.
So you'd see those on X-class quadcopters, just to give people kind of perspective.
And it looks like a small component of this particular aircraft.
Yeah.
I love the two capacitors, like probably holding on to dear life, like poking just near the big old hot motor. That cannot do it any good.
Yep. Well, that's the arrangement. And there's another capacitor back here. I don't know if you can see that for the fly barless. And then these are the spark arresters I was talking about earlier that I just installed today.
Right.
They've got a little built-in resistor, so that helps prevent the spark hop.
Stops you welding your XT60 leads together.
Yeah.
So with multi-rotors, we're kind of used, and pardon me if this is a novice question, because I don't really have any experience with helis, but with multi-rotors, people tend to kind of, get a frame, and there's a billion different frames out there, and then pick some components and put it together themselves. Rich. Are these built to spec, or is this something you tend to kind of get a heli frame and then fit all the parts on yourself?
Yeah, it's the latter. You tend to fit your parts on your own. So the motors, the best thing to do, it's like anything else in the hobby. If you don't know, it's to talk to other people who do, and then read. I like to read setups. I have a great faith in the community when I can find consensus. So when I go out to a channel or a website and I can find consensus where people are saying the same things, like, "Yep, I use an Xnova 4020 in mine and love it," and you hear 5 other people say the same thing, then I start putting a little faith in that. That's where I start to get my ideas. But I'm also blessed enough to have some guys that the ones that were pushing hard for me to get into helicopters who've been in them for quite some time, also advising me, and then doing their own testing and sharing what they get back too. So you do have to kit them out yourself. But helidirect.com in the US, they have a website that's actually pretty good, because when you go and pick a helicopter from their website, they provide suggestions, right? They say, here's, if you want cyclic servos, these are good. And they're selling. You got to take it with a grain of salt, because they're making recommendations for retail purposes. But they'll put you in the right ballpark, right? So once you understand what they're recommending is a good servo or good equipment, then you can make your comparisons and use that as a frame of reference. I've done that as well. So
you seem pretty sold on the Xnova motors then. There, with the high temperature resistance, they're doing the job for you.
They are. Yeah, they are. Although the Tron 7 is actually going to get a different motor called an Ego Drift. It will be the first time I've put something other than Xnova in a helicopter that didn't come as a combo. Now, some of the Align stuff, they do a lot of combo kits where they give you the motor, ESC, and servos in the kit. And that's not terrible, except on my Align, I've already replaced the ESC and the fly barless because I wanted my Icon and I wanted my ESC. And the reason I wanted the ESC is because telemetry. We get full telemetry on Radio Master using, and I did a video on this as well.
You're right, buddy.
I'm sorry, I'm dealing with a cold, but I did a video where using the Radio Master R161, that's the receiver right there, that supports F-Port V2. So with F-Port V2, we can have a single signal wire to the Icon, and then telemetry from the ESC is supported. So we get voltage and current, head RPM, and all kinds of telemetry from the Icon over a single signal and telemetry wire. One wire for both telemetry.
Well, I'm glad you don't have to rely on a timer.
No, I do not rely on a timer. I actually definitely use voltage. I'm a big proponent of using the voltage. And I actually have an OpenTX and EdgeTX tutorial video on how to create some logic to account for voltage sag. So rather than have your voltage timer go off just because you hit 3.75 momentarily, and then you lay off the throttle a little bit and it climbs back up to 3.85 or 3.9. So I built a little logic in OpenTX that says I only want the voltage alarm if I hover below 3.75 for a couple of seconds. Yeah. So
nice. Well, before we sign off, can I just ask you to compare your arm with the size of that blade, because it looks absolutely enormous.
Are you saying, would it pass the samurai test, Frank? And in fact, cut straight through his arm. I'm terrified to think it might well do that. Oh my god!
Just your forearm next to that blade. I just want to see a comparison of that size, because it just looks.
In the absence of a Coke can.
Yeah.
Or a banana.
Well, here's an iPhone. So this is an iPhone. That's an iPhone 12 Pro Max. If that helps.
That's it's enough to be a small wing.
I remember even in
scary.
a flight test episode where David Winnerstill flew just a 250 size into a mannequin, and the mannequin broke. So you don't want to have
enormous.
Be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, they're big blades, and they go back quite a bit.
So where can people go to find your videos then, John?
If you go to YouTube/RCVideoReviews, you'll find me. Or if you just search for RC Video Reviews on YouTube, they'll find me. So fortunately, I've done enough material now where YouTube gives me that one. So RC
You're
Video
lucky.
Reviews,
It's quite a general search term, and you own it now. Well done.
Yeah. And then I have a website as well. Although the website really, I don't do a whole lot with the website. It's mostly videos. I started with the idea that I would my whole premise in the video channel was to do video evidence. So here's what happened. I had a guy at our field, young kid. He was 15, 16 years old. He was flying his airplane and he crashed it. And he came back. He goes, well, guys, I don't think I'll be seeing you for a couple months. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I crashed my plane. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I got to repair it. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, this little motor, this E-flite motor is $75. And I said, what? 75? What? And he goes, yeah, it's $75. I said, no, you go on Amazon. Here's the motor size to look for. And you can buy it for $14.99 or whatever, $20, whatever. And he said, he goes, well, will it work? And I said, well, of course it'll work. He goes, doesn't have to be E-flite. And I said, no, it doesn't have to be E-flite. And then his battery too, same thing on his battery. He had a 3-cell 2200 battery. These are small motors, right? It was not a big plane. And his battery was shot. And he said, well, the battery is $45. I said, 45? Go to Hobby King and get yourself a 3S 2200 for $12. And he said, no, that won't fly it, will it? And I said, of course it will. That's all I have. And that's the moment I decided that I needed a channel to kind of talk about things like, I'm not cheap. I'll spend money. You can ask my wife. I'll definitely spend money with the best of them. Like, I was in the Navy, so the whole drunken sailor thing kind of applies, but I will spend the money, but I always look for value, right? If you're going to ask for my money, you got to give me the value in return. So when it comes to something like a 3S 2200 battery, that's not exactly high tech these days. I mean, so I get frustrated when I see that because I don't like the idea. I mean, it's a free market economy and all that. I get it, but I don't like to see people who don't know getting mugged. It bothers me. So that was why I got the channel started. It was just to provide information to say, hey, here's where you can go. Here's what you can get. Here's how much you can spend and get something. And then to show people, right? Just show, rather than talk, to show people, here's what happens if you do this. And that's really what my channel is really intended to be about, is video evidence, the concept of showing it rather than talking about it. A lot of people talk out their ass, really, when they have no idea. We have a flight instructor. I shouldn't say that. I won't say where he's a flight instructor. But there's a guy I know that his buddy was flying. He said, hey, I'd like my plane to go a little faster. What should I do? He goes, well, change your propeller from a 9.6 to a 10.6. And I said, number one, no, that's wrong. No, number two, don't tell people just to do that. He goes, well, it'll be fine. I said, no, it won't be fine. First off, changing the diameter doesn't change the speed. He goes, yes, it does. I said, no, and I'm losing it at this point because this guy's giving bad advice. It does not change the speed. It changes the torque, and it can pull more amps and get his ESC in trouble. So unless don't talk out of your ass. Base it on facts and analysis and data. And again, that was another reason for the channel. So.
All right, that is all we've got time for. But thank you very much, John, for giving us your time and coming on with the lovely voice that you have, and sharing your experiences. We've been Let's Drone Now. Thank you to all our Patreons. Thank you for everyone who tunes in and supports us. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or any other platform, we are live every Thursday at 8 p.m. GMT. And you've been joined by everyone's favorite Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
Shiny video stuff, Stephen.
Thanks. And I absolutely agree with that. Knowledge is power. Learn, help others learn, make everything better. Thanks.
Base it on facts.
And if you don't know, say you don't know.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Everyone's favorite Andrew / Frank. John from RCVideoReviews.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you. It was my pleasure to join you today. Thank you.
And I've been Bright Till I Fly, and you've been listening to Let's Drone Out. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.